I want to tell you a story about how I turned my mono black deck into something that can truly compete at a high level. This deck at first was very functional, but also quite boring, and I wanted to turn it into more of a powerhouse style deck that's more of my style while still being in mono black. I don't usually play black very often. It's not really my vibe. I'm definitely more of a green, blue, red kind of player, but I thought I might as well make a black deck. So if you've seen my first video ever that I've made, it's a mono black devotion deck. And I've had this deck for quite a while and it's not bad. It's definitely not bad. It does the thing that it needs to do. It has value in the command zone. You're able to win the game pretty reasonably. You're able to kind of control the board and just kind of play things that get you a lot of value until you're able to either play a really big spell that wins you the game, tutor up something that's even more valuable, or just kind of lock down your opponents until you're able to swing out with small creatures. It really just does the mono black good stuff kind of thing. And the deck was not bad, but I found myself barely playing it because it was honestly pretty boring. It's a very effective deck at what it does. It does the thing, and you just kind of don't do anything else besides that. It falls into that kind of category that I talked about with mid-range, where I had a lot of really good cards that worked together, but at the end of the day, the deck as itself didn't really do too much until you just kind of play a Torment of Hailfire for 12. And then, yeah, you're probably going to win the game. So since I was kind of done with doing all that stuff and I didn't really want to play the deck, I decided instead of taking it apart, I wanted to change something about it. I wanted to make it operate a little bit more like decks that I currently play, just with mono black in mind. What does this mean? Well, I like the very, very heavy tempo style play. I bring out my commander gets big, I protect my commander, and I play value pieces around my board that allow me to function very well as a deck, but ultimately the commander is kind of the center of everything. Now this is really good, and just like in 60 card formats, something like a Delver of Secrets is exactly what you're kind of looking for, or in Standard, a Haughty Djinn is what you're looking for. You basically just put a small creature onto the battlefield, it gets bigger over time, you protect it, you interact with the board, and you slowly win the game. That's what I like doing with my commander decks. It's also what I like doing in 60 card format. It's a very simple, easy way to play the game that's also very effective. So how can I find a powerhouse attacker in my command zone? What's something that I can use that will get bigger over time, but also provide some value? Well, there were really only two options. And that's of course Keurig, which is basically black as a whole. Absolutely insane, especially in a devotion deck where most of your pips are black and you don't have a lot of extra colorless cost on any of your spells. Also, every time you play a black spell, Keurig gets bigger and bigger, and he has lifelink. It's pretty great actually. The only thing I didn't like about Keurig is that he was a bit overplayed. You find Keurig everywhere. And honestly, if I'm going to play Keurig, I'd rather play him in more of a combo setting where I take advantage of having all that extra mana available to me a bit more seriously. And the second option was Yahenni. Now, Yahenni was an interesting choice. Anytime I interacted with my opponent's board and removed their creatures, I'm able to get Yahenni bigger and bigger. The fact that Yahenni is a vampire means that two very special equipment interact with him really well and are able to buff him up that much bigger. As well as Yahenni has his own built-in protection that works perfectly with a mono black strategy, in which you just have to sacrifice a creature in order to make Yahenni indestructible. This is an absolutely amazing effect, and one that allows me to kind of skirt around the whole removal problem. Especially in a color combo like black, there's not many ways I can protect my commander. Of course, in white, I can give everything hexproof or give everything indestructible at instant speed. In green, I can regenerate the creature, or I can also just give it hexproof or really big stats. In blue, of course, you can just counterspell. But in black, there's nothing like that. So the fact that I can have a bunch of small tokens that are already on the battlefield and then sacrifice them for Yahenni's effect allows me to keep my commander on the board a lot more often while he's still getting bigger and bigger and bigger through interacting with my opponent. So this was it. I had found my commander, Yahenni. Now, the mono black deck already had a very good list going for it, but if I wanted Yahenni to be my commander, I would have to change a couple of the cards. One, I needed Blade of the Bloodchief in there, and I needed a bit more of the protection pieces, like Swiftfoot Boots and Lightning Greaves. Although I can give my commander protection, and it already has haste, it's still just better to make your opponents have to remove an artifact before they can even target your commander. Having to force them to remove other things on top of trying to then remove your commander is just golden. It's exactly what we're wanting. We're wanting to disrupt them in tons of different ways with this deck. That could be by me interacting or by me forcing them to interact, which is why these pieces are here. Now, the goal is not necessarily to get Yahenni as big as possible. It's more to use your cards around it in order for Yahenni to get big on its own. You're not trying to remove things single target in order to get Yahenni bigger. You're more or less trying to advance your your board state with things like a Plague Crafter, a Fleshbag Marauder, a Merciless Executioner, anything like that. This will get your Yahenni a lot bigger, but also will advance your board state as now you have something to sacrifice in the future, or at worst you have to sacrifice it to its own effect, and you just get rid of 3 things for the price of 1. So the deck was really coming together. I made the couple changes that I needed to do. I made the couple changes that I thought were necessary, and I headed to my LGS. Now, the deck still had the same overall goal. I wanted to still win with a big spell. I wanted to still get my devotion as high as possible to get those payoffs that I need. And of course, I wanted to play a pretty good tempo style with a lot of valuable black cards. And the deck still did that perfectly. In the first couple games of playing, I noticed that the deck finally just had something to do. Players wanted to interact with me, and I wanted to force things with my commander. The fact that my commander is such a big threat and alarming threat means that a lot of my other pieces that normally would have gotten removed now aren't as big of a threat, because now you have an 8/8 commander coming your way. It used to be that Braids would get removed and some of my enchantments would get targeted, and a lot of the focus would go towards the actual valuable pieces when I first played this deck. But now, the fact that I have a huge commander means that all eyes are on that and only that. That's one of the big reasons I love about these tempo style decks, and it's the reason it's kind of my favorite type to play. Now, do I mean Voltron deck when I say tempo deck? Absolutely not. These are always a mix between the two. My commander is going to get big. My commander is going to swing for a lot of damage, but I'm never gonna make it a Voltron deck. My commander will not be the only threat, and in most cases will not be the win condition. But being able to swing out with a 15/15 creature, I'm always gonna take that, because either you're gonna remove it or you're going to lose a lot of damage, and now I can finish you off with a spell. So the deck functions basically the same way. All the same commander options from Mono Black Devotion are still there, and they just go into the 99. And you know what? They work really well in the 99 because, again, they're just really good black creatures. I still make a bunch of tokens. I still draw a bunch of cards. I'm still able to do the mono black BS that we all know and love, especially in a devotion deck. Nyx Lotus in these games was absolutely huge. The fact that you're able to just make 9 mana to then make your devotion even higher, and next turn you're able to make 12 to 13 mana, and the next turn you're able to make 15 mana, is actually pretty crazy. It definitely got a lot of removal going its way, which means that they weren't focused on removing my Swiftfoot boots. That's kind of the thing that's really good about these decks, is that when you combine really high valuable targets mixed in with still really good cards that function really well on their own, you just get an incredibly resilient deck. You can target the things that are most important on my board, and they'll set me back a little bit. But with a deck like this, you're not going to set me back nearly as much as you might want. This deck does a lot of things incredibly well and is very flexible in its game plan. But it never puts too many eggs in one basket, which means it's always able to go. It's always able to do something valuable. And so right then and there, I had fallen in love with the deck. It was absolutely wonderful. So now that we're done talking about the deck and the creation of the deck, let's talk about how do you play this deck. Before we talk about playing, we always have to talk about the Mulligan. In the Mulligan, you're looking for at least 2 to 3 lands. You're hoping for some kind of artifact ramp, but it's not 100% necessary. And you're looking for some sort of token maker or card draw advantage. If you have one of these 3 things, you're probably doing pretty well. The rest of the cards can probably be removal or some sort of valuable enchantment that you might want to play later in the game. You don't have to worry too much about your finishers, as you're gonna draw through most of your deck because of how much Mono Black Devotion is able to draw. You get so much card advantage from this deck, it's actually insane. So Mulligans, 2 to 3 lands, a piece of card advantage, and hopefully a token maker. If you can get that in an opening hand, you are set. Now, how do you actually play the deck? So it's pretty simple. You really don't do too much on turns 1 and 2, unless of course you get an artifact equipment, you get something like a soul ring or an arcane signet and some ramp, or you get some of the cheaper enchantments that we do run. Other than that, you're just kind of sitting around. Now, at turn 3 is when you really turn it on, because at this point you have plenty of 3 mana options that you can play in your deck. You can play a ton of value pieces that are going to get you ahead in the game. You can cast your commander, or at this point you're really able to start ramping or setting up a card advantage engine. So that's what you're really looking to do on turn 3. Turn 3 is when you really start getting into the game and you're able to start doing what you need to do. Now, turn 4 to turn 6, you're really just trying to accrue value through your card. You're looking to hopefully make a land drop on every turn. You're looking to draw at least 2 to 3 cards per turn, so hopefully you have that card advantage engine, and you're looking to start swinging with Yahenni and interacting with the board. Usually around turn 5 and 6, your Yahenni is around 5-5 to 7-7, and you're really just able to utilize him to put pressure on your opponents to start doing stuff. Now, if and when the inevitable happens of them trying to remove your commander, you're going to have to make sure you have things on the board that you can sacrifice to make sure that it's indestructible. This is why having a token maker is absolutely crucial in your opening hand. Now, if you don't have it, you're definitely playing a risky game and you might want to lay back on the commander stuff and just keep drawing out cards. Now, the game is almost over. It's around turn 8, 9, or 10, and you're looking to do something diabolical. At this point, your Yahini is either completely removed and hated out of the game, it's absolutely huge, or you've recast Yahini a couple times, and maybe it's still about a 7-7. At this point, you really should be leveraging Yahini and its power as best as possible. Keep swinging, and make sure you know which target you should be swinging at the most. At this point, you should have drawn a bunch of cards, and hopefully you've drawn into either a tutor, or you've drawn into one of your actual win cons. If you found a tutor, of course, you're going to hopefully set up a tutor turn where you're able to get a card from your deck, or if you have just the win condition, then you're hoping to play it on these turns instead. Now, if you've tutored, it's important to know which card you're supposed to tutor for. If your devotion is extremely high, go for Grey Merchant every single time. You have ways to reanimate Grey Merchant, so looping him will be the most important thing to do. Next on the list of tutorable things is Torment of Hailfire. You're either going to win the game or they're going to sacrifice everything they own and you can swing out with Yahini. Just an extremely powerful spell. And last, of course, is Exsanguinate. The same exact effect as Grey Merchant, but it's just a bigger mana sink. If you have more mana than Devotion, you want to go with Exsanguinate. But if your opponents don't have a lot on the board, you want to go for Torment. And of course, if your Devotion is the highest of all of these things, you want to get Grey Merchant. So that's really how you play the deck. Again, it's a tempo deck. You want to protect Yahini at all costs. You want to play valuable pieces around Yahini. You want to interact with your board with playing these valuable creatures that are able to remove things. And you want to make sure that all eyes are on Yahini and not any of your other cards. This deck is extremely fun to play, and it's very rewarding for high skill players. I have a ton of fun playing it now, and I'm glad I was able to turn my boring mono black deck into this absolute powerhouse of a deck. The last little point I want to make is how you can apply this to your own deck building. Is there a deck that's just laying around that you want to build, but you're not really sure how? Or maybe there's just a couple of pieces that you're like, I wish the deck was able to do this instead. Ask yourself these questions. Am I able to do something like that? Is it the commander that I want to play, or is it the strategy that I want to play? If it's the commander, how can I make the commander function a bit differently so that I'm completely sold on the deck? And if it's the strategy, how can I change the commander in order to make the deck a little bit more interesting, or maybe run in a completely different way? In this case, I wanted to make a mono black Devotion deck, but I didn't want to just sit around playing spells, not really doing anything with my time. So I figured out a different commander I could use that's much more my style of play, but I'm still playing mono black Devotion. I got the best of both worlds in this compromise, and it really helped me take that final step of changing the deck and making the best it could possibly be. Now it's a staple in my arsenal, and it's quite fun to play. So that is the story of how I turned my boring mono black deck into a powerful tempo deck. Thank you guys so much for watching.